Donald Trump and a high-ranking Russian government official appear to be publicly threatening one another in their respective countries with nuclear war after Trump's unilateral and likely illegal military strikes on Iran. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go, and before the nuclear mushroom cloud hits. All right, folks, this beef between Trump and former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev is reaching some interesting and really dangerous points. As Mediaite reports, Trump goes off on a Russian official throwing around the N-word, nuclear, while praising Putin as the boss. And again, he seems to include a bit of a sly threat against Medvedev and ultimately Russia. We'll take a look at the actual tweet itself here. Did I hear former President Medvedev from Russia casually throwing around the N-word, nuclear, and saying that he and other countries would supply nuclear warheads to Iran? Did he really say that, or is it just a figment of my imagination? If he did say that, and if confirmed, please let me know immediately. The N-word should not be treated so casually. I guess that's why Putin is the boss. By the way, if anyone thinks our hardware was great over the weekend, far and away the strongest and best equipment we have, 20 years advanced over the pack, is our nuclear submarines. They are the most powerful and lethal weapons ever built, and just launched the 30 Tomahawks, and all 30 Tomahawks hit their mark perfectly. So in addition to our great fighter pilots, thank you to the captain and crew. See that part? Talking about nuclear submarines and the ability of submarines, by the way, as a vector to launch nuclear warheads as well. So Trump is flexing on Medvedev, and directly through Medvedev, I suppose indirectly Putin as well. Medvedev is still a high-ranking government official, even though he's no longer the president of Russia. He and Putin did this thing, which was really interesting. They switched, right? So you have the president and prime minister of Russia, and I think it was in like the late 2000s, early 2000s, they basically swapped positions so Putin could get around some prohibitions against term limits, right? And now Medvedev is no longer the second highest ranking person in Russia, but he's still part of their National Security Council. So let's take a look at what Medvedev said. Well, right here. Senior Russian official reveals countries are ready to supply Iran with nuclear warheads. Then we'll get into, the additional reporting around Trump. Former Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev warned the United States via social media that a number of countries are now prepared to arm Iran with their nuclear warheads following the Saturday bombing of nuclear facilities. Medvedev, who now serves as deputy chair of the Security Council of the Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin, took to X to ostensibly reveal what he sees as the results and consequences of the U.S. attack on Iran, which is primarily supported militarily by Russia. In a 10-part thread cited below via ThreadReader, Medvedev laid out why this conflict could easily escalate beyond a preemptive attack designed to disarm Iran of nuclear capabilities. Quote, what have the Americans accomplished with their nighttime strikes on 3 nuclear sites in Iran? Medvedev asked rhetorically before answering his own question. Number 1, critical infrastructure of the nuclear fuel cycle appears to have been unaffected or sustained only minor damage. Number 2, the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. So he is seemingly confirming that Iran is producing nuclear weapons, which is the subject of debate, or perhaps he's trying to scare the United States. Who knows? But that's Medvedev. Number 3, a number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. That's the key part right there. He also notes that the U.S. is now entangled in a new conflict with the prospects of a ground operation looming on the horizon. Iran's political regime has survived and in all likelihood has come out even stronger. Not sure if that's the case. I mean, I suppose it could rally the Iranian people, but the Iranian people are largely oppressed by the Ayatollah. I mean, I'm not sure about that. That might be wishful thinking. But that's that number 3 part. Is a number of countries are ready to supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. Medvedev's objective appears to be clear. Dismiss any U.S. claims of a successful mission and not so veiled threats that Iran and Russia will not take this attack without response. Russia is, of course, in possession of nuclear warheads, which, if provided to Iran, could easily lead to full-scale escalation and nuclear war if these threats are to be taken seriously. So, let's see. Trump's casual comments about the threat of nuclear war are best evidenced by his comment, if he did say that, and please, if confirmed, let me know. However, some will certainly read that as less a serious threat and more his standard performative and facetious style. Nonetheless, no sitting president has ever been so cavalier to suggest nuclear escalation in such a manner, especially in a social media post. Again, with that implicit threat referring to our own nuclear submarines being propelled by nuclear energy, and also submarines being the means by which nuclear payloads can be delivered. So, J.D. Vance also weighed in recently. He said, bizarre. J.D. Vance fires back after senior Russian official threatens to give Iran nukes. U.S. President J.D. Vance shrugged off a senior Russian official's threat to provide Iran with nukes on Sunday morning, telling ABC's Jonathan Karl that it was, quote, a bizarre response to the United States' Saturday evening strike on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. Quote, this morning, the Russian reaction caught my eye. Dmitry Medvedev, of course, the former president, prime minister of Russia, now deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, said, quote, the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can likely say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads, noted Karl, before asking Vance, quote, what do you make of that Russian response? And are they off base? I mean, if they're saying that the nuclear program is still well underway. Vance replied, he says, quote, well, first of all, I think it's a bizarre response, but I also don't know that guy speaks for President Putin or the Russian government. One of the things we picked up, John, in our conversations with the Russians over the last few months, despite our many disagreements, of course, with the state of Russia, they've been very consistent that they don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And this is what I think many commentators underappreciate about what Trump did last night. Iran having a nuclear weapon, nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, is a disaster for pretty much everybody. It's one of the few issues where Russia, China, and the United States have brought a broad agreement, is that we don't want to see a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. So what the president did was very important. I'll let Putin speak to what the official Russian position on this is, but I feel very confident both for Russia and for China, and most importantly for us, that we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. And I think that goal is going to continue to animate American policy for the next few years. I hope Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon either. It is scary that Medvedev feels bold enough to say something like that. And again, he certainly is no longer the second most powerful person in Russia, but he's still a high-ranking national security figure for Russia. And it's just stunning to me that he would say something like that without, being basically a vanguard for Putin himself. Like, given that they're talking about, nuclear war, given how tight of a grip Putin has on the domestic government of Russia, it just seems unlikely that Medvedev was just shooting his mouth off, without consulting Putin on this. Maybe, he's being a vanguard, trying to articulate a threat against the United States to give cover for Putin on Putin's behalf. Who knows? But again, now we have the president of the United States and the former president of Russia, high-ranking government national security figure in Russia, talking about, supplying Iran with nuclear weapons, which would indeed escalate things dramatically in the Middle East and almost guarantee further U.S. involvement. I think this is total disaster. And then Trump's response in this way, like you would just think he'd just call Putin. Call Putin. Hey, man, your former prime minister said this shit. What does this mean? Your former president said this shit. What does this mean? Should we be on, what? I don't know. That's Trump for you. He did some similar things when he would publicly threaten Kim Jong-un in his first term, and North Korea as nuclear weapon. It's just, this is the part where Trump's lack of judgment and his vanity, his ego, his thin-skinned malignant narcissism put the entire world at jeopardy. Why would you even risk this? Medvedev shouldn't have said that either. Obviously, we have no control over what Medvedev says because he's a Russian figure. The president of the United States, on the other hand, should act responsibly regardless of what leaders in other countries do. And this is wildly, wildly irresponsible and should scare the hell out of everyone. And we're only 6 months in. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.